We are going to start with Georgina Mumba, who is representing Arizona State University.
Georgina Mumba. What's up, G?
Hey, love. When you sit in a wheelchair from dawn to dusk, you're bound to have back problems. And I have a back problem. So 6 weeks ago, after flying for over 20 hours from my home country, Zambia, to here, I was desperate just to lie down and rest. But that was up until I saw staff from my university, Arizona State University, with a placard saying, "It's time for Africa." That caught my attention. I was wondering, it's time for Africa. What does that mean? A very simple statement, but very telling. And similarly today, I have a very simple question for each and everyone in this room. Africa, what is your disability policy? And I think most of you are thinking, maybe I'm referring to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or I am referring to your respective national policies on disability. No, you are wrong. I am speaking about your individual disability policies. Your individual disability policy, when you meet somebody that is blind. Your individual disability policy, when you meet somebody that has autism. Your individual disability policy, when you meet somebody that has Down syndrome. Your individual disability policy, when you encounter somebody like myself. In my experience, the norm has been to emphasize limitations at the expense of potential. My narrative is the all too common African narrative of a person with disabilities. But that narrative has to change. It must change. I contracted polio at the tender age of 2. I come from a humble background. My parents could not even afford buying me a wheelchair. And so, for the most part of my primary education, my mother used to carry me on her back to and from school every day. But as I grew older, so did she. And so at some point, my family decided I should go to a boarding school, preferably a special school. As most of you can relate, most special schools back home in Africa start as homes for abandoned disabled children. And so was the school that I went to. In these schools, you're going to find children with single disabilities, others with multiple disabilities. And so on my first day of class, I was taken to a class for children with learning disabilities. In that classroom, there was not one single piece of furniture. There was no learning materials. We used to sit on the cold, hard floor with nothing but a piece of chalk. And all we had to do was replicate whatever the teacher wrote on the board. And so one day, as my teacher was walking by, he saw my writing, and he seemed intrigued. He didn't say a word, but I could tell he was intrigued. Later that day, I learned that I had been moved to another class. This time around, a class for children with sight impairments. As a child, I was quite excited. It was a new adventure to read and write in Braille, but that in itself was a distraction. And so my teacher elected to take me to the next class. This time around, it was a class for children that are deaf and mute. As you can imagine, it was another challenge. Language was a barrier. And so, ultimately, I was moved to a normal school, a regular school. I got to that school. I just never got into that school. And you know why? Because it was inaccessible. It was very challenging. At first, I had a lot of friends. They used to help me get into class. But over time, I became a burden. And that's the reality of being disabled. But because you easily graduate from being a friend to being a burden. And ultimately, Your social circle narrows. But this never got to me. What really got to me was the indifference. The indifference from the system. The indifference from the teachers. After a while, I got discouraged. I got frustrated. And so I just ultimately dropped out. Next, I was taken to another school, another special school. This time around, a special school specifically for children with physical disabilities. Oh boy, I was home. Finally, I was home. Finally, I was in a place where potential was priority. My potential was priority. Within months, my performance picked up. When I sat for my grade 7 exams, which back in my country is the transition from primary education to higher education, I was not only the best student at my school, I was the best female student in that entire district. Yeah, that sounds right. Exciting. But I got a scholarship, a prestigious scholarship, to go to one of the most prestigious schools in that district. But guess what? The minute I showed up, the decision changed. My scholarship was retrieved and passed on to the next able-bodied person. Years down the line, I went to university, and that was the hardest 4 years of my entire life. Today, I'm a trained policy analyst. I'm a seasoned public servant. And Zambia is a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But guess what? I'm still marginalized, I'm still excluded, and I'm still discriminated. And so today, ladies and gentlemen, I am asking you one simple question. First of all, we need to rethink our disability policy. But that starts with the question, Africa, what is your individual disability policy? Thank you.